Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am honestly so excited to guide you through today's topic because we are going to decode the hidden mathematical architecture of the natural world. Seriously, if you've ever looked out at a dense forest, a wide open field, or a vibrant coral reef and just wondered how it all perfectly balances together, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, we aren't just looking at the classic animals eating other animals dynamic. We're going to dig into the strict, unyielding numbers that literally govern every single breath, bite, and movement on Earth. It is a system of absolute, beautiful complexity, but also of shocking inefficiency.
All right, let's kick things off with a massive central paradox, shall we? Picture this. A single giant oak tree can easily support millions, literally millions of hungry insects. But if you take an entire sprawling field of lush green clover, it might only be able to support a single hawk flying overhead. So why? Why does nature seem to have this bizarre mathematical imbalance? Well, the answer lies in a grand mystery of disappearing energy.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Who eats whom? The foundations of the food chain.
It all starts with the sun, right? Millions of miles away, solar energy beams down and is captured by our producers, like the grass in a meadow. That grass performs photosynthesis to convert all that raw solar energy into chemical energy. Basically, that energy is now locked tight into the plant's biological compounds. Then, a hungry primary consumer, like a grasshopper, comes along and chomps on the grass. Next up, a frog, our secondary consumer, lashes out a sticky tongue and catches the grasshopper. And finally, an owl, our tertiary consumer, swoops down in total silence to catch the frog. On the surface, it looks like a perfect linear transfer of energy, you know? Just a neat little baton pass from one organism to the next. But as we're going to see, it is definitely not quite that simple.
Section 2. The shape of nature. Visualizing ecosystems.
Biologists often use pyramids to map out these relationships. But there's a catch here. If we use a pyramid of numbers, where we just simply count up the individual organisms at each level, things can get incredibly distorted. Remember that single oak tree we talked about? If you try to draw a pyramid of numbers for one oak tree feeding 10,000 beetles, well, you don't actually get a pyramid at all. You get this very precarious, top-heavy, upside-down triangle that looks like it's going to tip right over. And that's simply because the number 1 at the bottom is way smaller than the 10,000 in the middle. So just counting organisms is a highly flawed way to measure the actual energy available. We need a much more accurate method.
So the crucial point is this. Instead of counting bugs and trees, we calculate the biomass. Biomass is the total dry mass of living material at each stage of a food chain. Now, you might be wondering, why dry mass? Well, water doesn't actually contain usable biological energy. By physically removing the water weight and measuring just the dry biological material across a given area, we get the absolute truest representation of the chemical energy stored at that specific trophic level. And the cool thing is, when you measure biomass, the producers at the bottom always form a massive base, giving us a true, perfect pyramid shape every single time.
Which brings us to Section 3. The disappearing energy mystery, the leaky system.
We start with this massive, solid foundation of plant biomass at the bottom. But by the time we actually reach the top predators, the pyramid shrinks down to almost nothing. Why? Because of this one jaw-dropping number, 10%. When one organism consumes another, only about 10% of the energy available at the lower level is actually converted into new biomass at the next level. That means an astonishing, mind-boggling 90% of the energy is completely lost from the food chain with every single step up.
So, where on Earth does that massive 90% actually go? Well, it essentially vanishes in 3 main ways. First up, leftovers. Organisms rarely eat every single part of their prey. A hawk is absolutely going to eat the meat of a snake, but it's not going to digest the skeleton, the tough scales, or the teeth. All that stored energy is just left behind. Second, even the parts that are eaten might not be fully broken down. Things like tough plant fibers are simply digested as feces. But the third, and absolutely the biggest reason, is just everyday life. Think about a fox frantically chasing a rabbit. Think about the sheer amount of energy used to sprint, dodge, pump blood, and just keep its body warm in the dead of winter. All of that metabolic fire simply radiates out into the cold air as heat. It's just lost to the food chain forever.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. Calculating ecological efficiency, the math behind the mystery. Because scientists don't just guess at this role, they calculate it meticulously. let's look at the hard numbers. Imagine a field with 144 kilograms of rabbits just hopping around. If snakes come along and eat all of them, we don't suddenly get 144 kilos of snake. No way. We only get 15. If we do the math, 15 divided by 144 multiplied by 100, we see a transfer efficiency of just 10.4%. Then when hawks swoop in and eat those snakes, those 15 kilos shrink down to a measly 1.6 kilos of hawk. Again, 1.6 divided by 15 times 100 gives us exactly 10.7%. The numbers are undeniably clear here. This right here is exactly why food chains rarely ever go beyond 4 or 5 levels. By the time you hit the top, the original energy pool is practically empty.
And this brilliantly illustrates why energy pyramids are considered the absolute gold standard for biologists trying to model ecosystems. Unlike a simple numbers pyramid, an energy pyramid factors in this constant massive loss of heat at every single stage. It shows 100% of the sun's captured energy at the bottom, shrinking by a strict factor of 10 at every single step, while those giant green arrows represent the 90% just bleeding out as heat. It perfectly visually captures the inherent inefficiency of life.
Section 5. Human Impact on Ecosystems, Breaking the Chain.
Knowing just how unbelievably fragile this energy architecture is, we really have to ask, what happens when human impact breaks the chain? When we alter food webs, whether that's through overharvesting a specific food species or introducing foreign species, the ripple effects are immediate, and they are severe. Because top predators are already just surviving on a tiny 10% fraction of energy, any disruption from below acts like an ecological earthquake. If you overharvest a fish, the eagle at the top doesn't just get a little hungry, it faces a catastrophic energy deficit and rapid starvation. They simply will not have enough of those massive energy inputs from below to survive. Alternatively, introducing a foreign species creates this sudden, unexpected competition for resources that are already incredibly scarce.
A really prime objective example from our source material is the introduction of the cane toad in Australia. So they were originally brought in to eat agricultural pests, but because of their highly toxic skin, the native predators couldn't actually eat them. They effectively became an ecological black hole. The toads consumed all the energy from the bottom of the chain, but because of their toxicity, nothing to eat them to pass that energy up. They completely bottlenecked the entire food web. As the research notes, due to their toxic skin, they have destroyed many native species and damaged habitats, where the biodiversity has been reduced. The birds and reptiles that normally relied on native frogs and insects suddenly lost their entire energy supply because the toads had monopolized all the resources. It completely broke the chain.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is Section 6, Nature's Endless Recycling System. Energy is lost, matter is forever. Because while energy constantly leaks away, nature plays by a completely different set of rules for physical matter. While energy flows straight through a system and just dissipates out into space, matter is perfectly, endlessly recycled. In the carbon cycle, we see decomposers, things like bacteria and fungi, acting as the true unsung heroes of the biological world. They are nature's ultimate recyclers. When plants and animals die, or when they ingest that undigested matter we talked about earlier, the decomposers step in and break that organic matter down. Now, they do use some energy for themselves, yes, but crucially, they release the physical carbon atoms right back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide during respiration. Think about the mind-bending reality of that for a second. The exact same carbon atom locked inside a rotting log today will literally become part of a brand new cloverleaf tomorrow. Energy vanishes into the cold vacuum of space, but matter is forever.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. We live in a world governed by an incredibly strict, unforgiving energy budget. The 10% rule dictates that life at the top of the food chain hangs on by a mathematical thread. So, if nature brilliantly recycles its matter but is fundamentally designed to bleed 90% of its energy at every single step, how much interference, how much overharvesting, and how much disruption can this incredibly delicate architecture actually take before the pyramid crumbles completely? It's a massive question that biologists, and honestly all of us, must continue to grapple with. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.